What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with some Detroit Lions free agency news, and today it begins week 2 of NFL free agency. Sort of, not really. I don't know if that really means anything. Signings, moves continue to be made. Today we had the Matt Ryan trade go down. I thought that was a good trade for the Indianapolis Colts. Either way, we got moves that continue to happen, and the Lions still have some cap space. So today we have some Detroit Lions free agency news as a player is coming in for a visit and could potentially be signed. So let's get it started.
The city's been down, and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to a video. Glad you guys are here, and we're back with some Detroit Lions free agency news. It's good to be back to talk about free agency. The moves are likely not done yet. I would not expect the moves to be done for the Lions, and there's a lot of teams that are going to continue to make moves, whether that's cuts, signings, trades, whatever it may be, and the Lions will probably be involved in that as well, as they do have some cap space left to spend according to Over the Cap. So we're going to go through that, but we're also going to talk about this player that is visiting the Detroit Lions today. Apparently there are also other teams of interest, but today, he's visiting with the Lions, and we'll see if he leaves with a contract. It may not be today, but at some point, maybe he'll get a deal with the Lions. Who knows? But let's start off with the salary cap side of things first. Just a quick little refresher on where the Lions are at money-wise, how much they still have to spend for free agency. So according to Over the Cap, with the cap hits for this season, the Detroit Lions are looking at about $22.1 million in cap space. It's not a bad range. It's like around the top 10 mark in the National Football League right now. Again, that does not include Khalif Raymond's cap number for this season or David Blau's cap hit for this season. Those two contract details are not out there, at least from what I've been able to find. According to Over the Cap, they don't have them yet, so those two numbers are not included. Don't expect David Blau's to affect it very much, if at all. And then also on the other side, Khalif Raymond probably will affect it a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be super expensive. I'm assuming there's some incentives in there. His cap number may be around $2 million this season. I'm going to be honest. I think it could be in that kind of range, just based on the contracts that we've given out so far, which means the Lions still have some money to spend. We know you got to have money for your draft picks, probably around the $10 million range, maybe more to that to be safe, but it means the Lions can still make things happen. And today, the report is the Detroit Lions are bringing in defensive end Arden Key from the San Francisco 49ers for a visit. Shout out to my man Phantom Lion on Twitter, of course, for tagging me in this. And this was one of those players when we threw up kind of that free agency big board, sort of, not really, just players that I kind of knew about. So I made him into a list of guys the Lions could still target. This was one of the players that were on the top of the defensive end list. He's still a very young player. He's only been in the league for 4 seasons, but there's still a lot of kind of craziness going on with this player. He's very outspoken. We have seen that on social media. You can catch some of the Instagram lives, and he's talking to everybody, and he's just a very outspoken player going back to his college days at LSU. But he's also a very talented player, which led him to being a 3rd-round pick by the Raiders. However, it didn't work out very well with the Raiders. He ended up with San Fran last season. He had his career season statistically, and now he's looking to possibly get paid a little bit more money than last year's contract, which was just 1 year, just over $1 million on his contract last season. And we know about the Lions. One thing we know about the Lions, just based on last year, with Charles Harris. Sometimes some of these high-pick guys maybe haven't worked out yet completely, but they come in, they get an opportunity. We saw Charles Harris take off. Maybe that could be the same thing with Arden Key. For Charles Harris, who was injuries that kind of pushed him into a role, gave him an opportunity, and he lived up to it. Arden Key, hopefully he's not in that same situation, because I don't want to have those injuries again, but he could be a guy that has potential to, find some consistency next season for the Lions and build off what he did last season. So who is Arden Key, you may be asking? He is a 25-year-old defensive end, as I said, coming out of LSU, 6'6". Some people say 6'5". 6'5", 240 pounds, but that weight has fluctuated like crazy. We've seen him down to, I've heard reported, 225 pounds at Raiders training camp, all the way up to 280 pounds at LSU. And it's fluctuated big time. It was one of the biggest concerns with him coming out of the draft. Coming out of LSU, let's just do a quick little background. Coming out of LSU, he got off to an extremely hot start. And at one point, people were saying, maybe this could be the one pick in the draft. I mean, as a freshman, he was an All-American SEC player. Then in his sophomore season, he went on to have 12 sacks, which was just incredible. First-team SEC player. However, after that sophomore season is where things kind of got a little bit dicey. Heading into the offseason, he took 4 months off for a personal reason. And apparently this was not told to LSU why he was taking this time off, but during that time he had shoulder surgery. Also, he said that he was also going to rehab for marijuana usage. So it had him miss a lot of time. He comes back, he only plays in 8 8 games that next season. His production dips. He only puts up 4 sacks. A lot of the scouts that year were saying, man, he looks much more sluggish, doesn't look like the same person. But also, and on top of that, he came back weighing about 270, 280 pounds. He put on tons of weight. So now there was off the field questions. There was off the field questions, of course, about the rehab, which he said has been put behind him, which is great. You love to hear that. But then also there's been questions about being able to control his weight, the statistical drop-off. He also had to deal with a knee injury in that final season with LSU, which apparently was lingering a little bit into the combine, and that's the reason that he said that he chose not to run his 40-yard dash. So there was already questions, and he chose not to run his 40-yard dash at the combine. He did, however, run it at his pro day, where it was not a time that you would like to see from a guy at his size that apparently was, I think, weighing in like 235 pounds, and that's not very good. It was one of the slower ones for the edge class, especially you consider the size that he came in at. There was a lot of concerns, but he was happy with his performance. He said they saw the 2016 LSU Arden Key, the statistics that I put up, the way that I moved around. But he also said that he wasn't focused on the 40 time, he was more focused on the 10-yard split, which I completely get. I mean, personally, when I'm looking at the pass rushers, I don't really care what the 40 time is. It's more about that get off, that explosiveness. And I was unable to find exactly what that 10-yard split is, probably because he ran it at the pro day and there's not official times there. So I don't know what his 10-yard split was, but that's what he said that he was focused on. So there's all these question marks coming out, which goes from being, maybe like a first-round pick, all of a sudden now he lands in the 3rd round to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now it's interesting because actually in that draft, they take him in the 3rd round. They also drafted Maurice Hurst that season in the 5th round out of Michigan. They would ultimately both end up being with the San Francisco 49ers last season, which is pretty wild. We'll talk about that in a second, however. So he gets to the NFL. He's a 3rd round pick. He lands with the Las Vegas Raiders, but unfortunately his time with the Raiders, well, it did not go as planned statistically. First season in 2018, he only had 1.5 sack, 19 pressures, 8 quarterback knockdowns, which is not bad, but he played 63% of their snaps defensively. And apparently he was a little bit undersized trying to play that role because he kind of became more of a consistent starter than maybe what was expected for him kind of just be a pass rush specialist. So at his side, he definitely had issues holding up on the run, some of the run fits they were asking him to do. And that was even a question coming out of LSU with his size, were some of the run fits that you put him in. Moving on to 2019, when unfortunately he only plays in 7 games that season due to a broken foot. So he misses a lot of the 2019 season, which of course hampers your growth. That season he did have 2 sacks, but only 4 pressures and 2 quarterback knockdowns. But again, he only played in 7 games. His snap counts went way down. Then in his final season with the Las Vegas Raiders, he had 0 sacks, 16 pressures, and 10 quarterback knockdowns on 45% of the defensive snaps. So that was the 3rd year of his rookie deal. Clearly the production's not where they want it to be. There's been injuries. It's just not where they want it to be. And that's when the surprising cuts happen. They cut both him and Maurice Hurst from that year's draft class, I think on the exact same day. It came out in the exact same tweet. So both those guys were cut. And that's when the San Francisco 49ers swooped in and picked both of those players up. Now, he wasn't signed to a very expensive deal, of course. He was brought in, like I said, on a 1-year, just over $1 million deal by the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco this past season, he went on to have probably his best statistical season in the National Football League. Now, he wasn't coming in like as a starter, right? He was more of a rotational guy there. He played about 35% of the snaps defensively for them. However, statistically, he put up some good numbers. 6.5 sacks, 22 combined tackles, with only 2 missed tackles accounted for, 17 quarterback hits, 19 pressures, and 11 quarterback knockdowns with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, we know they have other talent along the defensive line, like a guy like Nick Bosa, which helps a ton. Also, shout to Rad for bringing this up because I kind of forgot about it. The defensive line coach for the San Francisco 49ers is the old Lions defensive line coach. He was there from 2010 to 2017 as the Lions defensive line coach. Very good defensive line coach, Chris, whose last name I can't really pronounce. That guy was there as well, which we know he's done a fantastic job. So they bring this guy in, and all of a sudden he has this top-notch season. Again, he was still a rotational guy for them, but his role mainly consists of, if he was out there on early downs, playing like a base 4-3 defensive end. And from what I understand, he was weighing about 240 to 250 pounds. His weight was much more stable with the San Francisco 49ers. And then on obvious passing downs, they would slide him inside. They could slide him inside, have him go to work against a guard, playing like a 3-tech role, and just get after the quarterback. Very useful on stunts for them. Instagram lives that, he'd like to go back to San Francisco, but, they're going to have to want me back. He's like, I know they'll want me back, but they also, the money's got to be right and stuff like that. So obviously he's looking for a little bit of payday, and apparently a few teams are interested, including the Detroit Lions, which makes sense because, like I said, pass rushers get paid. And when you have that production, it's hard to overlook it, especially knowing that he's this great athlete coming out of the draft. They had all this hype, just a lot of questions off the field, but now it looks like he finally found some consistency. And even according to this tweet that the Lions are having him in for a visit, they say he was working on his pass rush technique to become more of a consistent pass rusher. We know that defensive line coach has done an excellent job. Lions, of course, want to have more defensive line talent. They want a good rotation. They want more depth there. And that's kind of what it looks like that his role could be with the Detroit Lions. But it would be a different direction than basically what they had, last season with a guy like Nick Williams. Now, he was already there, so they just gave him a pay cut and kept him around. But Nick Williams, over 30 years old now, you kind of just know what Nick Williams is going to bring to a table. And he played a lot for us last season. He played about half the snaps. Fortunately, we had a lot of inconsistent play out of Levi, guys like that, guys that we're expecting to take the next step next season. And we're counting on those guys to take the next step. But Arden Key would be a little bit different because he's much younger. Like I said, he's only 25 years old. Feels like there's much more upside with this player. And like Charles Harris, if you give him a shot, maybe he comes in and has an awesome season. Hopefully, he doesn't have to play as much as Charles Harris had to play last season, but he could come in, play consistently, and who knows, maybe have an opportunity to be brought back and just add to this defensive line depth that we have with more upside in a younger player. So diving into last year's film, obviously you see the measurables, you see what he did coming out of LSU. There's a couple things that stands out that he does really well, but there's also definitely some areas that he needs work. Like I said, with Nick Williams at his age, you kind of know what the guy's good at and what he's not good at, what he's going to bring to the table. This player definitely has a lot more upside, especially if he can find that consistent range for his weight. Of course, a couple things that stick out is his height, which leads to him having a very big wingspan. He has outstanding length. Those two things can be very crucial for pass rushers. That length can be huge, especially trying to set the edge on the outside, which he can do. He can set the edge well with his length, but length can be very beneficial. Also, he has a pretty nice get off. Again, I was unable to find that 10-yard split coming off the combat or coming out of his pro day, but there is a pretty explosive get off there that you notice when you watch his film. He has showcased some of the bend around the edge. If he is able to get by an offensive tackle or a guard or whoever it is to get flexible and finish the play. That's, I think, one thing that he can be very beneficial for is those obvious passing downs, and he was one of those guys that you put on the field in those situations. Now, as a third-round pick, you'd like him to be kind of more of that for whoever drafted him, but for the Lions, as a rotational pass rusher, he is nice on those obvious passing downs because you can put him in there. You can do a lot of stunt work with him. He works really well across the defensive line. He has really nice agility, and a lot of times, especially on the interior, he can win with just his agility, just his feet, setting up offensive linemen that way, which opens up the door big time for what he can do on stunts, working inside, outside, or opposite, or setting up other stunts, kind of just ramming himself into a couple of guys to clear a path. You could play a lot more around with your defensive line because they're passing the football, so stunts and stuff like that aren't going to get you in trouble. San Francisco, a lot of times on those passing downs, they would put him in the inside. Now, he looked like he weighed more than 240 pounds last year. Maybe that's just because how tall he is, so maybe he was around 250, but they would put him in the inside and let him go to work against guards. He did see a lot of, double teams from the center and guard there, which can be nice because if it's an obvious pass down, you have him out there and he takes on two guys. Obviously, it frees up everybody else to go one-on-one, where that's Romeo, Julian, Charles. All these guys have an opportunity now to go one-on-one, and you would hope that those guys who you're paying money to would win their one-on-ones, right? That's what's expected, whether that's Levi, whoever it is. Those guys are expected to win their one-on-ones. So if he could take up those two guys. If he's not double-teamed, he has shown some flashes of success working against guards. And again, a lot of it seems to be by his agility and beat them off the snap with their get-off, get to the backfield quickly. He does have some of that flexibility to kind of maneuver his way and kind of find the little cracks of an offensive line, slither through some of those openings as a pass rusher. And we've seen kind of an arsenal of different things that he can do. So, athletically, he has a lot of potential within his game. Kind of like Charles coming out of Missouri was that deadly spin move that he had, but you knew there was more that could be added and it could be much more consistent because he just has this ability. Kind of the same thing with Arden Key. There's a lot of ability here that just has not been found consistently. The length is a big part of that, and get off can lead to a lot of things, but also you'll see him try a lot of things as well. The swim move can be very beneficial, especially at his height, where he can get over top of offensive linemen. The spin move, you'll see him throw out the spin move many times. Definitely don't think it's always great. Sometimes he's kind of just spinning in place, but he could definitely throw that in and continue to work on that as a counter pass rush move. Where he's lacking right now to me is that consistency as a guy that can win as a pass rusher early. Not really just stick with the play and fall into a sack, but be the guy that wins his one-on-ones. He doesn't nearly win one-on-ones consistently enough as you would like to see. There's still a lot of polish that needs to be there. But to think that he worked on that last season with a good defensive line coach, and you see how his production jumped up, you got to believe that with another good defensive line coach like Todd Wash to have a year to work at it, his production could take another jump. I think Arden Key just needs to polish up some of his pass rush plan and what he's going to, because you do see a lot of depth in his arsenal. It's just not all that clean. Here he is. He's going to do this a lot. He's going to set up like kind of this jab to the outside and try to work back inside on the tackle. Now, I haven't seen enough reps, I think, where he just beats guys around the edge to set this up. This one isn't set up very well. It looks a little high. It's a little bit slow. But you do see kind of the rip through counter he tries to go to. He's actually going to spin off, this help block that he has from the inside. Here he is against Cardinals. Now, this one's a little bit better. Same kind of thing. Does the jab to the outside, works back to the inside on the right tackle in this play, and he gets a lot more movement. I think he sells it a lot better on this play. Watch him. He stays pretty low. He sells a little bit better there with the hands. Boom, gets inside. I think he just needs a better polished plan, especially as a counter rusher, because you see a lot there of depth. You'll see the swim move. You'll see, the rip through, the spin. Sometimes, though, he telegraphs his moves too much. He a lot of times like to go to the bull rush or try to long arm, but he kind of gives it away. He doesn't sell it really well. It's just about the polish to me. Here he is against Packers, this time working on the inside left guard here, and you're going to see him go to a two-hand swipe. Again, I think he telegraphs moves a little bit here. He kind of knows what he's going to. You can see him two-hand swipe, but there's not much after that, right? You don't see the bend. I think the offensive lineman's able to kind of get a little bit lower, win the leverage battle, kind of push him out of the pocket. So you see the initial ability to win, but not really finish off the play. There's so much potential there because he can kind of do everything that you ask him to do. There's not really seemingly limitations in his game. It's just the consistency. It's the consistency shooting his hands. One issue going back to LSU, and look, LSU, you'll see a lot of reps where he just blows by tackles. I mean, it's off the snap and he doesn't even get touched. He just blows by him. Kind of gives me some Kayvon vibes, where you'll see Kayvon do that a few times. I think Kayvon's a better athlete. Let me just throw that out there. But sometimes you'll see Kayvon just run by tackles. They won't even touch him. There are reps of him at LSU doing the same thing. But there's just consistency with hand placement that needs to be improved. Bull rush, that was a big issue for him coming out of LSU. It's the consistency to win with a bull rush. Doesn't really do it. Some of that is the weight side of things, but I think also a lot of it is hand placement. A lot of times he could be a lot of times he could be high, bull rush the guy back into the pocket, because once you're high and you're a tall player, you're not really getting much movement there, and they can kind of anchor down and just kind of hold you at that spot. Against tackles, you'll see them flash here and there, but it's not enough consistency for him right now that you would like to see for a guy that's going to get paid. Doesn't have that consistency for a guy that's going to get paid for multi-year big deal as a pass rusher. A lot of times you'll see him just kind of run into a wall basically as a pass rusher. That stuff needs to be cleaned up to become more of a consistent pass rusher, but the toolbox is there where there's so much that could be added to his game, and there's so much that could be cleaned up and refined and polished where he could become a much better pass rusher, and he definitely has not hit his ceiling yet. I have seen there were effort questions coming out of LSU, but I could definitely say watching some of the 49ers stuff, and I think this is part of the reason because you're rotational, you're always going to come out there with a lot of energy. He played only 35% of the defense snaps. However, when he's on the field, the guy does bring a lot of energy to the game. Anytime someone makes a play, he's out there dancing. I said he's pretty outspoken outside of the game, but he also does seem to bring a lot of energy to the field as well. He's just excited for guys to make plays. I saw him running down, chasing down plays. Definitely energy that he brings to the team when he's on the field, and it's led to a couple of sacks where he's kind of just fallen into the sacks. As a run defender, the length is very helpful, and he can tackle. He has enough agility on the outside for an outside linebacker or a defensive end in a base situation. The issue that he has to me right now is the discipline to stick on the edge and set the edge better. Way too many times he's jumping inside the pocket and leaving the outside lane. Sometimes you'll see it's almost like he has tunnel vision. He doesn't really see where the play is going, and he's kind of going one way. Everybody else is going a completely different direction. Misdirections, counters, things like that. Really what he's seeing, those things are questions right now. Has the ability to set the edge, no question about it, because he has some of the agility. He has the length to kind of just wrap up ball carriers that come in anywhere in his area. He's just not consistently setting the edge very well. But you'll see him crash inside on slants, things like that. Like, you could have him crash as an offensive lineman, shoot one gap. He seems like that kind of player, like a one-gapping defensive lineman that can shoot gaps, slant inside, things like that, get some penetration. That's where he can be beneficial. The leverage side of it, to me, needs to improve, but he does seem like sort of a raw free agent prospect that's coming off his best season, working with a really good defensive line coach. And remember, coming out of Las Vegas when they let go of him, the Raiders, I mean, he was like just a bad system. It was bad all around. He just wanted out of there. So he was just excited to get out of the Raiders. And obviously, that's not a great thing to put out there. It just did not go well with the Raiders. Running Yannick Ngakoue, so when you have Yannick there, you don't really need the guy anymore. I think what would his role be with the Lions? To me, he'd be kind of a backup defensive end. I mean, of course, he could compete for the starting role, but to me right now, he looks like a backup defensive end that could compete with a guy like Charles Harris, try to become a starter, but he'd probably back up Romeo. Charles Harris and Romeo probably coming into the season as your starting defensive ends. Then on the interior, we're at that four-man kind of front. You look at guys like Levi, Aleem, Michael Brockers, of course, can play defensive defensive end, just doesn't give you a lot of pass rush out there. He's just more of a base down 5 technique run stopper. John Pennicini right now kind of holding that down. So to me, he'd become like a defensive end rotationally. Then on obvious passing downs, if you rather go with him instead of a guy like Levi, just give Levi, some rotation there, you could do that. You could try to put him at defensive end. I just don't think it'd be his best spot on pass rush downs right now. I think you'd rather have Julian or Romeo or Charles out there. But there's flexibility of what he can do in terms of stunt work on those downs. So to me, it feels like a backup defensive end that on pass downs could push inside and give you some push there, and possibly have some upside to compete for a starting role if everything went as planned. He dominated, are all the reports coming from, the Raiders at training camp. He was super dominant, just never really worked out throughout the season. Plus, there are reps of him dropping into coverage. Now, not as much as a guy like Charles, it didn't seem like, but he did have some reps dropping into coverage, dropping into kind of the hole, taking away some crossers. Nothing crazy, but there is some athleticism depending on the weight that he's playing at. And he said that coming after the combine, going through the drills, and he was like, they got to see the old LSU guy, the 2016 LSU guy that was athletic, that was fluid, the back pedals, the flipping of hips, the guy that could drop into coverage a little bit. So there is that ability too. I have to throw it out there. But with the Raiders, and you kind of see this with like certain players like Evan Ingram with the Giants. I mean, it's just like, there's just those bad moments, and there's those things with him that just kind of stick with you with the Raiders. Like the Deshaun Watson play where the guy literally threw it through like a sack. He was kicked in the face. Guess who kicked him in the face? It was Arden Key. You also take a look at, there was a face mask that basically led to them losing versus the Dolphins. It's like those couple moments that stick with you, and you're just like, oh my gosh, we just want to move on from this dude. Same thing with the player, and it's just move on. New location, things will be better. So I feel like there's a lot of potential here. There are question marks out the field. Seems like things are kind of behind him, but at the same time, there's also a lot of potential that he could bring to the table. We would dive into this more if the Lions picked him up. Should they be interested? I think they should be interested. I think they need D-line help just in general. Now, if they picked up Arden Key, does that mean they won't draft a guy at 2? Again, I don't think so. I don't think it takes out of play drafting a pass rusher at 2, but again, it opens up the draft where you don't have to hit pass rusher at 2 with what you have. Yes, I would still like to add more depth to defensive line, even on top of that hitting into the draft, but it definitely does open it up more. It definitely does, no question, with a guy like potential like that, kind of like a draft pick would have as well. Definitely opens it up more so you don't have to kind of force defensive line. If you had Arden Key, I think you lock him into a weight, you put him at 250 pounds like Charles Harris, you have him be a base defensive end. On pass downs, you slide him inside with his height. He could be very beneficial if he can continue to clean up some of his game like Charles Harris was able to do. But I think I would be interested in Arden Key. Would I pay him 3 years, $20 million? No, I wouldn't do that. I think that'd be kind of getting away from him. I think you're spending too much. I can't see locking him into much of a multi-year deal here just because I don't see the consistency there. I would be worried about a big-time multi-year deal, maybe 2 at max. I wouldn't want to lock up too much guarantee money. Of course, you're going to have to pay him because pass rushers get paid. I'd be interested, but there's no way I'd be paying him more than Charles Harris. I couldn't do that, but I would definitely be interested. So if you picked him up, yeah, it definitely seems like pass rushers are probably not going to be the pick at 2 at that point, which I think is very possible anyway, because you don't know how the board's going to go. If you want this guy and Jacksonville takes him at 1, then what? What are you just going to be like, oh, we take the second best? You want to take whoever it is you feel like is the best at that spot. And right now it feels like Hutchinson's going to be going number 1 at Jacksonville. So I would be interested, but I definitely wouldn't be banking on, hey, this guy's going to be that dude. Like, is he not coming in with the super reliable, you know what you're going to get? He's kind of a little bit more of a wild card with much higher upside than a guy like a Nick Williams type of player, which is like, okay, he's going to give, he's just solid. You want more than that. You want more than just solid. We're going to be expecting Levi. Of course, Liam played well. Those guys to take their steps next season. Romeo coming back. He's supposed to be that guy. It's why you paid him. But Arden Key could be a nice little component to mix in there as well. And I'm all about building up this D-line. So if the Lions are going to do it, do it. Make it happen. And I'm sure the visits could be very important just to get to talk to him, see his personality a little bit, whether or not he would fit in here, because that's a big part of it. And also maybe if you get him to go through some workouts and stuff, just to see how he moves around, see what Todd Wash thinks of him. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd definitely be interested. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.